Everyone, it's Lolita, and I'm going to continue working on the charcoal drawing we've been working on. This next stage is where I start the shading, and I'll explain to you a little bit about the values I'm choosing and why I'm choosing them. I hope you enjoy and learn something. See you soon. This is my charcoal drawing. When we left off last, we were at we as a class, because I recorded it pretty much to this stage in class on Friday. But what I'm doing here now is I'm starting to erase some of the background, and that is the reductive process. So what I've already gone here and done is started taking some of the value out of the foreground or the ground, and then I'm going to go into the background. So this foreground and then background, and it's all ground. So I'm going to go back into the background and lighten up the this area back here, the horizontal wall. If I look in through here, this is about where it gets a little darker because of the way the light is playing on across the wall. And this wall surface is just slightly darker than the actual foreground because of the way the light is playing against the wall. While I'm going in here, I'm also cleaning up my the line on my value chart, because since my value chart is integrated into the drawing, I still want to have a certain presentableness to the overall look of my drawing. So this, I'm noticing now here that I've got this angle at, this needs to be a little steeper. So I'm going to go in here and readjust that and bring this down to here. This is slightly above. It comes here and actually goes a little lower here, down here, and comes in there, but it's got a steeper slope than I've drawn in there, and I like to get my angles right. So I'm going to go in here, and now that I feel I'm comfortable with that angle, I've reestablished it, I'm going to go in there and erase around and try to bring everything to the same mid-tone value, just slightly darker than this and not as dark as this, or maybe just slightly lighter than this tone, somewhere in between the white and the highlight tone I have in there. I'm going to leave a little bit of a sense of darkness in here where the wall and the flat surface that I have my setup on, so where the vertical and the horizontal planes meet, the wall and the desktop surface that I have my setup on, that's my horizontal, my horizontal plane, and then my vertical plane is my wall. And my wall's just a little darker than the ground that the setup is on. All of this back here is, I can also define the edge of the objects a little bit even in this stage, and I can refine those just even further when I go back in over it again. So that's about right where I want that there. I think I can take this down in tone just a little, and I'm just going to rub my eraser over this surface just to lift it a little, and not worry that it gets a little too dirty, because if it does, I will I'm just going to use that as smudging the smudging a little bit of the excess value that I have down here, smudging that around. So this comes over like this. I'm going to move with that there just a little more, lift this in here a little higher, and still have a sense of it being a little more in shadow than the this side, because we've got the light coming from this direction going from left to right across the surface of this setup, going back in there. So there's lots of value I can lift in here to get this the same value as this. I've done quite a bit of smudging, drawing in the shape of the stem of the jalapeno several times. Let's go in here, get this lighter. There's a little bit of the shadow of the pig, the molcajete, coming over this area. So I'm going to leave that in there a little bit. This comes over here a little, and I've got the shadow of the jalapeno in there. This comes around, and again, a little bit of the shadow of the pig in there. Go here and make these two surfaces match a little more closely in value, lifting that up. And now is a good time for me to take this drawing outside and get rid of all of the debris. I can get rid of this. I know that was just all too dark in there. I did not need any of that in there. So before I empty it, I'm going to do a little bit of adjusting in there to account for the fact that I've readjusted where I'm looking at the base of that molcajete. So and I'll go and play with those values a little bit later, adjust them. This I think I can already just go in here. I'm going to tone that down and tone this down just by removing some of the charcoal by blending it in. I'm going to go in with a, that was with the willow charcoal earlier. So I'm going to go in right here just a little more, just a little deeper with my 6B, and just make a nice little line down this way. And this is where the corner surfaces meet. And I'm just shading in a little bit right up to that corner line. And even though this is going in dark like this, when I buff it out, it's going to get a lot lighter. And I do want a little bit more value loaded here at the shadow of that wall where those two surfaces meet. And that's like the ultimate depth of the area that I'm looking at for this drawing. This is going to come around and be really dark. So I feel confident just putting that there, so I almost give myself a little bit of a guide on how deep I can go, and it helps me not be so worried about how dark I've gone here, because I've got, it's like a metric, you know, a meter, a gauge to see how relatively dark I'm toning the surface. So I can go back in there, and that's going to be probably a little darker than I want it to be. That line takes on too much presence, so I'm going to remove some of that tone. Just go in here and dab at it with my, maybe pass this over just a little harder with my kneaded eraser here. Go back in here and play with that, diffuse it out. I don't want it to be too strong because it is in the background, and I just, yeah, so that feels sort of like a corner boxy, and then it's going to get more of that feeling. So I'm going to go clean this off, dump all of this debris outside, because even though I can dump it on my studio floor, I really don't want to deal with vacuuming all of that up. And then it's just also to be in solidarity with you guys that you may not have a studio floor you can dump things on. All right, I'll be right back, and this will be nice and clean, and we'll start doing some more additive and reductive charcoal drawing. For me, this is all the fun part left. I got all of the nuts and bolts of the drawing down. I feel really good about the skeleton of my drawing, and then even what I've moved beyond that skeleton phase already down here, I feel really happy with that. You see, I've taken this outside and for the most part dusted off all of the debris of the eraser debris that I had in there. So I've got myself just a nice fresh drawing that I'm working with here, and I can even smudge that a little bit more. But I'll go back in and refine that as one of the very last things that I do when I polish off this drawing. I'm going to leave this here to protect my drawing while I work with it. And I think just because I'm right-handed, I'm going to work on this basically filling in the detail from left and right, so I'm not all over this and smudging it too much as I go. And I can even work from top down, because I know that once I get down here to the bottom, I'm gonna have all of that up there resolved, and I can leave it alone. So I'm going to go in now with my pencils and start doing some of the detail in the mortar part of this mortar and pestle here. Remember that this is just my molcajete, and that is, again, what I'm doing here is a little bit of talking about my cultural heritage, and this is something I grew up with. Here is this type of little mechanism here. It's made out of lava rock. I'm going to try to get a little bit of that lava rock texture in here with and rocks as a there and line that out. And I'm just going to be working interchangeably with my 4B and my 6B, and just play with them as just as I see fit. It's going to be fine to get it in there, and this is about all I want to do in that area there. So I'm going to come in here now and darken all of this up. This is all really super dark in here because this lava rock is just really dark black, and or just super dark charcoal gray, and it's got like little speckles of white in it. But I'm just taking some of the charcoal that I put down and smudging it out here to add the darkness that I'm looking for over to this edge. And that's because I don't want to create too much of a mess. I want to limit the amount of charcoal I have floating around on my paper. But I'm going to be able to go way darker here, so I don't want to just sit there and fill all of that in with my pencils. I'm going to go in and shade all of this, because the minimum shade this whole pig is somewhere in between these two values here. So I know I can get in there and drop the whole thing down to that really super dark value. So what I'm going to go in and do first is drop in all of my black areas with my pencil, and then after that I'm going to go back in and darken the whole of this little pig molcajete and drop it down in value. So I'm not going to be shading like this the whole time, but I did just take some of that over because I want to get a little bit more refined on my edges here, because they need to be sharper and crisper. So I'm already starting to play with that, and I don't want to go in there in too much of a general way, and I want to be more specific when I'm working with my edges. So I'm just going in here and going to shade this in where I see the light falling, and creating a shadow here at the edge of going in. And for me, this is what's going to work so I don't lose my shapes, is going in here and describing or articulating the darker parts first. So I've got go too deep with all of the rest of the bowl. And, who knows what it winds up. Maybe it will wind up that I'm the piggy. I'm going to go in here behind the pig's neck here, and I've got that dark line here. It shadow underneath the pig's jawline. This down here is all just fairly black down here, so I'm just going to shade all of this in. I've drawn in that. So again, like I said, this is the fun part of the drawing, where I get to start coloring it in and rendering it. That's just really my absolute favorite thing to do. One here, it's darker over here, and I'll refine that shape when I come back in later. I don't mind that my pencils are getting a little dull here, because they're just here to cover a decent amount of the page for right now. And I'm just coloring in these shapes that I've already put in here. Just coloring in those dark black shapes. I go back in and define that one a little more. This is the bottom of the bowl here, and all of that is in pretty deep shadow. This is a three-legged pig, and this is her other pig. Her other leg, rather, is back here. You can see it in the just slightly underneath the middle bottom of the bowl there, and then it comes over here, and it's got her little leg defined also as part of the bowl, and this goes in here like this, and this is all nice and dark in here. And this is also where I can define the edge of the onion a little more. So I'm going over here and putting this all in dark, and this is where that little tip of the onion is. This all comes over here, and this is all really dark in here, because this that lava rock is really super dark. And that's going to be shadow, so I'm going to lighten that up in there just a little bit. This is where I had the bowl bottom at first, but then when I did a little bit more checking, I felt that it should go up just a little bit to allow a little more room for the shadow and for the leg of the pig, because I didn't want the leg of the pig too far down. So that means I'm going to have to go in there and adjust that value just a little bit. So let's, I've got one little part up in here to get in here and go dark with, and this is going to be darker in here, but I'm going to shade that all in a second. So I need to drink some water. All right, so I'm going to just get in here and move some of this around. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit more willow charcoal down. I've got let's see, I've got some lines in here that I don't really want to get rid of. So I'm going to put this willow charcoal down and see if I can push, how far I can push this willow charcoal down into the paper. Again, this is like a matter of working in solidarity with the my students too, is I really don't have as a lot of experience with drawing with willow charcoal, because I really enjoyed charcoal so much that I just jumped straight into working with the stick charcoal, this charcoal. So I'm back to the basics here with you guys and getting into the again, some of the foundational material or supplies, tools that artists work with, and getting, just being, having just a recent experience with the exact same media that you guys are working with. So it keeps me just really current with you guys. So I'm going to go here and make a line here because I've got that is where the lip of that bowl of the molcajete is, going around here, just establishing that lip back there. This is a little bit darker here. You see how I've got a line already back there. So I'm going to go in and define this edge just a little bit with the pencil. And then that's going to also, when I go in and do a little bit blending, it's going to help me understand what boundaries I'm working with so I don't exceed those boundaries. And I'm going back in with pencil here because I want to, back to that idea of boundaries, I want to make sure that I've got the boundary of this dried onion skin just bound off, so that way I don't get into any of that area when I go in and over darken the surface with the willow charcoal. So you see here I've gone back in and outlined it, and it sort of gives me a nice little border to work with. So I get in here and see how far I can push this stuff down into the surface of my paper here. I'm going to stay above the rim of that, and I'll go in there and darken that later. But I'm going to do this in sections just to, again, with the idea of I'll be able to have this whole bowl and be able to use it to relate to the rest of the drawing that I'm doing here. And then it also helps me not lose some of the contours that I put. Charcoal pencil stays darker than the willow charcoal did. So where I laid down the charcoal pencil, even though I'm blending this out, it still stays there on the surface because it's there. It's just a slightly different media than the NuPastel or the charcoal pencils. So now in here, because my fingers are just a little bit too big to work the finesses of those contours, I'm going in here with the blending stump rather, and just using that because I've got the point here. I've got that where I can go right up next to the edge of the onion skin and get that in there a real nice fine point and push that charcoal right up to the edge. And this is one way we define the edges with the tone rather than with outlines. So this way, again, you saw that it started with outlines, but now I'm getting into that stage where I'm changing that over so it is now being defined with that tone. And so I feel pretty good about that. I'm going to blend some of this down. I still have you can still see the general rim of the that bowl of the molcajete, so I haven't lost that there yet. This is really all one tone in here, just dark. It's going to get a little darker here underneath the chin of the pig because that goes down into shadow, so that would follow the form. All of this across the nose of the pig is really dark, and it's really dark compared to the background too. This is dark in here too, so I'm just taking some of that and blending it all down into there. Want to get that surface looking real like I've worked all of it with the same care. And so I went in and with my finger and did some blending in that leg there in the back. I'm going to just pass over this surface here. You see it retains a lot of the integrity of the shadows that I laid down with the charcoal pencil. And even if I pass over here, that's okay. I know I want to get like much darker down here and in the bottom of this bowl to add to that form. This rim back here is really not that light. While it is lighter than the rest of the bowl, it is not quite that light. And then I can get in here, and again, this is just that volcanic rock, get in there and blend that so it's all a really nice dark. And you see that now the tones are really developing in my drawing. This it feels like I swung out a little bit too far on that edge with this with that shading, so I'm going to just take my eraser and go back in there and trim some of that off. And then even this is also just another way to refine the edge more. So that's already starting to describe some of that uneven form of the little piggy there. I am going to take a break and I will be back. I'm back, my pencils are sharpened, I've had another look at this, and the pig is still just way too light. But I'm glad I've got this nice base here on her already, but she needs to be somewhere between black and this value, and most of all, she's not even as dark as this. So I need to move this way deeper down in value. So I'm going to go in now with a little bit more of a workhorse that we've got in our toolkit, and that is the NuPastel charcoal here. And I'm going to get in and do some drawing with it. This one you see I already broke it. It's a whole stick, but mine already broke, and so now I also have to be careful because you saw how that just shot off to the side when I went down here and put some of it down onto my paper. You saw how it like splintered off over to the side, and so that just means I need to be careful when I get into blending this, because it could present me with issues of it smudging into my paper where I don't want it smudged. So I'm going to go in here real tight with one of those sharp tips. Just use it just like I would as a pencil, because I've got that really sharp tip. And it's okay to do outlines here, because that's going to just blend right into the body of the pig here. So if you do outlines, that's okay, as long as they're not going to be seen as outlines in your final drawing. So you can go in and outline things to help you understand the shapes, or just to delineate your shapes further and make sure you have boundaries. Give yourself that kind of control over your drawing, but you ultimately want to go back in and make those disappear, and that's going to be by blending. That my tip just broke off, so I'm going to just take that and push it over into the body of the pig, so I don't have it interfering with the values in my white onion here, because that's just like way too light to be messing with the surface of the onion in there. This is where the that shadow falls. This comes all the way actually up here and over here, goes back down over here, and I have a little bit of that left over from when I put it in with a pencil. And then I'm also familiar with it, so even if I erase it, if it winds up getting erased out, that's not that big of a deal. It's still really super easy to go back in there and reestablish it, because the skeleton is laid in really well, and the conditions that I'm working with aren't changing. That pig's not moving around. Everything still looks the same as when I first started working with it. This goes up here, and I've got a little bit more of a darkness underneath the lip of this, using the side of this to go in and get darker, but not quite as dark as I was getting with the tips of the NuPastel. Going in and trying to just follow the contours of the rock that I see, and maybe even leave some white spaces. Go back in here, already defined here in the leg, and I know that this is where I want it to be the darkest, so I can go back in here with this Conti and be, or, well, not Conti, sorry about that, NuPastel, and be fairly confident. Again, in the belly, like I'd mentioned before, it's darker under here, and then a little dark in here where it goes into shadow up there. Rock of it's lava rock that this thing is made out of. So I'm adding a little bit of sense of the texture. This actually on this side, this part of the rim gets a little darker than what's underneath here. So I'm gonna push some of that up in there, and so that way I can play with those values when I get around to them. I'm going to go back in and lift some value out from underneath that lip, because when it goes around that corner, again, it gets darker. Going just back in here and smudging and blending that in. And I'm working this with this cloth, the paper towel, because since I'm going over such a large surface area, I don't want to quite mess around with like little tiny blending tools like this. Or I thought I had brought some Q-tips in, but I guess I left them in the other room. But you can also do some blending with Q-tips, and on my next break I'll bring those in when I'm going to do more fine blending, because for me these paper towels, when I'm working with this big of an area, they get the job done that I need done. They, because I need to cover a bigger surface area. I'm going to have to take all of this and get rid of all of that debris. So I'm going to take this and also just get in here and darken up the pig overall, because remember I talked about how this is just, it needs to be somewhere between the black and the deepest gray I've got down here, and this is just not dark enough. This comes around here like this, so so I can even shade some of that in and offer the build a contour and form of the pig's face that way. This comes down in here, and I'm going to just blend some of that out. I'll go back in there and refine those edges a little more, taking some of this excess charcoal and just rubbing it down and right into, and using my finger literally as a drawing tool underneath the paper here. Get in there. This is like where I would go in with a Q-tip, because that's going to be a lot more refined. This I can take, and the excess charcoal I've got on the tip of my paper towel here, make this whole object a lot darker. This is dark, 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 dark. All of this is dark, and you can still see a sense of the form of the pig there, so I haven't lost that entirely. And I'm going to go back in and again with the idea of additive versus subtractive, but here I'm going to go in with my 6B, and that one's I like how dark this one is, but I can't get quite as controlled with this as I can with the pencils. But this one is just really nice and a satisfying black. Sorry about bumping the camera. And go in there and because I can still see, again, the form that I'm trying to describe here that has not disappeared away, and get back in there and reestablish those darks and work with the form of the bowl. Sort of darken here. There's a little bit of a highlight, but all of the bowl is darker in here. Idea of having the edges of your objects defined by a shift in value, where the planes shift, where the light plays on the objects differently, and that's how we see form. So this is still describing that form. Start down in here. This side is also darker here as it comes around here. All of this is dark and in shadow in here. This is that line where I had talked about. This is actually darker than the bowl. And then I've got the bottom of this mortar, this pestle rather. And then that's in shadow too, so I can darken that up, go back in here, and all of this is darker still. This is dark from here down. Again, where I did put an outline, but I'm going back in and filling that value in, so I'm not just relying on just only an outline to define the edges, but I'm relying on the shift in tones, the shift in value. Okay, that's looking a little better. This I want to go in, and this is where this is darkness, but it moves this direction, so I want to move that over that way so I can stay with the congruity of the shading that I'm looking for across this form. This comes across here and goes out a little like that. This in here is darker, and you can see the lip, and this moves in and gives it something of a circularness to the form. We'll get in there with that lip, and then about right in here is where it switches value and becomes darker underneath, going forward here. And then underneath here it's still really dark again. And then it's got where just some of those weird shapes that the rock makes. It's a little uneven, so I'm going in there and breaking up the straightness of that edge. Defining the form again. This down here, I want this darker. Right behind that pig's neck, I want that darker still. I'm going to load that back in there with some value. And this gets a little, not quite that. And drop that down. Drop that down in value. Pull that off, so I throw that in the trash can. And just establishing this form again in the face. This goes over like this. This is like the ear is making a shadow, and it's also part of making a shadow across a little bit of an eye formation on the pig. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, well, sorry about that, you guys. I thought I had pressed record and I did not. But here is where I have gotten this to by, and I was using the Q-tip so good, but oh well. I'll be using the Q-tip a little bit more on here, moving this over to, oh, wow. Um, I was going to shake all of this off, but I think I'm not going to now. I'm going to go in and use this a little bit more in here. This comes in here. I'm darkening this, comes across here and goes all the way down here. It moves around, goes in towards the center of this, almost does this like little bird beak kind of thing. I like to look for shapes that I am familiar with and abstract out reality that way. This comes in here and this all has just so much room to go much darker because it's a it comes in down underneath there and follows the contour. It swings around like this, a little on the round side, goes back in and dips in a little there, comes down here, and all of this is nice and dark. I'm going to still some of that darkness, and like I said, I was going to dump some of this, but I'm just going to go and do what I like to call stilling it. All of this is darker in here. This is all one plain deep dark down here, and that is describing the surface of that tomato. Yeah, I feel like that is a lot more descriptive of it. This comes around and it's a little lighter and a little lighter than this and darker than the surrounding area. Comes around and dips on this surface. It makes sort of this another what looks like a bird head to me. Comes around, it's sort of flat here, makes this arm type of shape here. And again, just because I defined the shapes before doesn't mean that I can't go back in and reconsider them while I'm actually doing my shading. So, you know, I don't have to be a slave to what I've already put down. I can make my own determinations along the way and make little slight adjustments just to refine it and make a better drawing out of it, because the first shapes that I did, that I put down, they were just ideas of what the shape might be, and in fact refining them is definitely a way to go. Just because it's what you defined at first doesn't mean it's what you have to stay committed to. When you see that an adjustment is in order, you get to make that adjustment. That's the beauty of being the artist, is that you're in control of what's going on here. You are in control. So this is a little darker here. This goes out this direction and a little darker in through here. I'm going to take the handy dandy Q-tip and make that shadow a little stronger. This comes around here and describe that curly edge. It's got a little bit of excess skin in there still from, and adding that shadow in here. It comes around like this. It gets lighter as it moves out over in this direction, like this kind of number swings back around here, because it is describing the roundness of the onion. This comes in through here, goes about right here, about out to here. I'm gonna go in here and just shape this a little better, and I'll refine that so it's not so outliney. And then now it's time to do some erasing, and I think I'm going to go in there with the Click Eraser rock and just lift this ever so slightly in here. The shadow underneath the pig's belly is actually lighter. It comes around here. I need to lighten that a little bit. That line of the onion is getting a little too strong. This gets a little lighter in here. The shadow shapes like this with a shadow, the shape of that shadow of the pig, and then this comes around in here. This is a lot lighter in here. So now I'm drawing with this. I'm going to go back in and tighten up that shadow in there. This is about where this comes around in through here. This is lighter in here, all the way in through here. So just a really nice strong edge on that jalapeno. I'm gonna get in there and go around the foot like this and take this out to here and really erase all of this, because this is all fairly white in here. That stem in with the so you see how nice those edges are starting to be defined just by virtue of the shift in value, as opposed to putting a outline around my object. So this all needs to get erased in here. Nice big general erase, get rid of all of that. I'm going to move this around with my brush here. Get it out of the way. All of this, I'm going to have to take this, I'm going to take this all outside and just dump all of this again. So I can, you can also, if you have, like the ability to just brush some of it off to the side, you can brush it around your paper like this, pile it up, and just take that straight to a trash can in your house. Or if you have a napkin or something, some type of receptacle that you've gotten ready, you could just dump that right in there and deal with it that way too. And you don't have to take it outside per se. So here we go, just shaping that shadow some more. This comes in under here. It's not quite as dark underneath there as I've got it. It's there's quite a bit of contrast, and this moves back, does a little bit of that linear perspective based on the squareness that the little foot is carved at. So this comes in and goes in through here, and that shadow comes down something like this and curves around. So I think I can get rid of all of this in here too. This is much lighter in here. And here it gets really white underneath this edge. So I'm going to go in with my click eraser again and get that really nice tight edge developed. So you see now I'm really in the developing edges stages of my drawing. Lift all of this up because it's really too dark and I don't want it to compete with the shadow, but I don't also I don't want it to compete with the wider areas of my paper too. So I'm gonna get back in there and see if I can lift some of that up, but not get so deep that I express some of the fears that some of you have expressed, or so I don't actualize some of the fears that you have expressed with saying, Lolita, pink erasers are the bane of my existence. They plagued me as a child. I always ripped the paper. So this is just going to be a much more controlled erase so you don't rip your paper. So I'm going to go in here with my click eraser and get in tight around there, but not push that value out so far. But I do want the contrast between the background and the foreground that there should be with the lemon, and get that described. This is actually the surface of the onion is actually way whiter than what's around it, and it's gotten really nice and saturated while I have been working on the background. So let's get that edge in there established and this edge in here established much wider. This comes down, and again just drawing with the click eraser. It's another fun thing to do. And so that is part of what that little husky skin looks like. It is a lighter in here, but not as white. So I'm just going in with the eraser, not using as much pressure, so that way I'm not removing as much of the pigment, the charcoal from the paper, as I was back here with just really applying a lot of pressure because I want that to get as white as possible. You know, this might be like a place that yeah, that looks pretty good, and there's a nice sense of contrast between the surface of that onion and the backgrounds it's up against. I'm going to play with this skin in here a little more. This gets a little lighter in here. Separate that out a little. I've got this comes in and creates a shadow in there, so I'm going to just lift this up just a little bit, and then in here this is another layer of this onion skin. I'm just going to take that out and leave that down there and shadow it. I think I like it that way, so I'm going to leave that alone there for now, and I'm going to go dump all of this excess stuff off of my paper, and then I'll come back in and pretty much finish this drawing. So stay tuned. I'll be right back.